It would not be an international window, it would not be a Six Nations if there wasn't hot debate and discussion around selection for England and what should they do. Should they stick or twist? And also, it's no shock that a lot of this conversation is happening around the halfbacks. Welcome back to the channel. That's broadly speaking what I'm talking about in this video. And asking the question, what should Steve Borthwick do in terms of scrum half and fly half? Does he go for continuity or does he go in a different direction and break up the partnerships that are, even at this stage, still relatively new? It's not an easy question, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people that have an opinion. So the comment section is where you can have that. If whilst you're here, you can like the video and subscribe to the channel as well, then massively appreciate it. But what does Borthwick do? So Steve Borthwick, after England's defeat in the Calcutta Cup to Scotland, bemoaned the lack of cohesion and continuity in his team. The fact that there are a number of combinations from the centres to the back three, to back row, pretty much wherever you want to look in that England team, with the exception maybe of Danny Care at scrum half and George Ford at fly half, players that haven't played together all that much. And in comparison, when you look at the Scotland team, there are combinations that have played together more, and that lack of cohesion, he feels, is a reason for where England currently are and the pain that they are currently going through. Which leads to the question, what does he do moving forward? Because we've seen George Ford be the starting fly half throughout the Six Nations so far, because Marcus Smith was injured at the start of the championship. Alex Mitchell was the starting 9 but got injured, and Danny Care started against Scotland. But now, as we're seeing it reported, Marcus Smith is possibly in line to return maybe for the Ireland game. Mitchell's injury maybe not as serious as first feared when people thought he could be out for a couple of months. He may be back in line to face France at the end of the championship. So do you change that formula or do you stick with it and grow those combinations that you're kind of committing to at the moment? Suppose we look at the options for Borthwick in terms of cohesion. If you look at, there are some club teammates in the England setup with Mitchell and Finn Smith. You then got Danny Care and Marcus Smith with Harlequins, or the kind of Mitchell, Care with George Ford. Care and Ford obviously really experienced. Mitchell played a bit with Ford at the World Cup, but not a huge lot. It's one of those things for England. They have good options. I don't think there'll be anyone who has any sympathy with the fact that he has all these players to pick from. There are good options there, but it's what do you do? What are the best ones? What are the best combinations? And how do you go about that? The other thing as well is when it comes to cohesion, does it matter? Now, to a degree, I think, of course it does. It obviously helps. But you could then point towards Ireland, the fact that you've got Gibson, Park and Crowley, haven't played a huge amount together, but that seems to have slotted in and been fairly seamless. Even Ben White and Finn Russell with Scotland, because Ben White's come in over the last year or so. It was around the Six Nations last year that he started to start more instead of Ali Price. The fact that he's come in with Finn Russell, they haven't had a huge amount of games together. I think it's just over 10 that they've played together, but still Scotland and their attack looking pretty good. So is it actually more about the system than anything else, rather than the individual players? But I think it is difficult. You know, for England, if we're looking at the halfbacks, for example, after the World Cup, I think Alex Mitchell looked like the guy that would take up that mantle. So do you stick with Mitchell? Do you stick with Ford at fly half? Because even though Ford is one of the older statesmen of that team, he's still only, 30, 31? Another 4 years to the World Cup, it's very feasible that he could still be there if England did want to go in that direction and stick with, I guess, the route they were heading on since the start of this Six Nations. You've then got Marcus Smith coming back into the fold, who, based upon what you see reported, the suggestion is that actually he would have been England's starting fly half had he been fit at the start of this Six Nations. So do you bring him back in which case you're breaking up who the 10 has been anyway? Plus, always with Marcus Smith, there's been this question mark of whether England are playing a game plan that gets the most out of him, whether he's fully been able to grasp that 10 jersey by the scruff of the neck. Do you give him more time with it? Or do you go with a Finn Smith, the youngest guy in the squad? He's been brilliant for Northampton. He's had some tough tests as well, by the way, already for Northampton, and he looks like he is capable of dealing with some of those issues. But do you stick with him? Do you break that up? If you do go with any of those guys, if it's a Marcus Smith, do you partner him with Danny Care? Because they're club teammates. They play some brilliant stuff for Harlequins. They know each other's game plans inside out. Likewise with Finn Smith, do you partner him with Alex Mitchell? Because they know each other's games and they're playing really well for Northampton. Whatever you do in that area, there are so many good options, but there are so many questions as well, I think. And I don't think anyone really knows what the best combination is. Loads of you in the comments will have your opinions, but I look at it and there are so many good players. I'd stick with Mitchell at 9, I think, frankly. When it comes to Flyhalf, I don't know. Before the Six Nations, I said Finn Smith. If Marcus Smith is back in, do you want to give him a chance, particularly now that there's no Owen Farrell in that team, to see if the suggestions that Farrell bossing the ship made it more difficult for Marcus Smith to excel with England, to explore that possibility? Honestly, I don't know. To me, it kind of comes back to what I hinted at before when I talk about does it actually really matter in terms of cohesion, both in terms of caps and in terms of time playing together? Is it more about the system for England? And this is partly what I have often found myself falling back on over the last year, ever since Steve Borthwick came in, and you can go back further than that to the end of the Eddie Jones era when there are discussions over the England centre partnership or fly half and scrum half, whatever areas of the England team it is, does it not more come down to how England are playing? Ireland are showing us that, I think. If you have a really good, slick system, players can come in, they can slot in, they will know their job and they will be able to execute. So what's the solution for Steve Borthwick? If the question is, what does he do? For me, it's probably more about him having the courage of his convictions, decide who your starting halfbacks are, and stick with them. Whether that's Alex Mitchell still and you want to go with George Ford, whether it's Mitchell and Marcus Smith and then Finn Smith is the player you have regularly coming off the bench to him gradually gain more experience. But I do think there is an element that England have to stick with it. I think chopping and changing consistently isn't the plan. You need to have an idea of what direction you are going in, whilst also having an overall system which gets the best out of these players. What do you think? Does that make sense, or have I just kind of skirted around the issue? It's not easy, and there are a lot of good players there to choose from, but what combinations do England go with? And why is this always such an issue? It seems like we're always talking about who should play here, who should play there, whereas you look at other nations and they have quite settled combinations and partnerships. That's going to be, I think, a big talking point over the next few weeks as England head into those final 2 fixtures. Let's not forget they're their toughest 2 games, but there's also pressure on them because England right now are staring down the barrel of potentially another Six Nations campaign with just the 2 wins, another campaign where they have failed to show meaningful progress and they failed to close the gap on the teams above. I think England are capable in terms of the talent in that team of maybe not beating Ireland but upsetting France possibly, of changing the narrative and the view on this team to finally beating a side that you feel are better than them, of upsetting the odds. I think they're capable of that, but I think the overall system and the combination that Borthwick goes with is key before we get to those games. What do you reckon? Let me know, comment down below, rotation or cohesion, what does he do? Also, like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that sort of stuff. I'll see you in the next one.